Well, today we're talking about sin, and I mentioned that, and how many of you feel like it's hot in here suddenly? Yeah, it's not you. I just couldn't resist it. It's warm, we know. We'll work on it. This past week, my family and I, seeking some warmth, vacationed down to the Texas coastline, which was just fantastic. Absolutely great seafood. The pool, the warm sand, the warm waters of the Gulf right there. And we stayed in our travel light camper, travel trailer that we travel with there and stay in. Now, for those of you who are uninitiated into the RVing lifestyle, let me help frame this for you. Our ultralight travel trailer weighs 4,000 pounds. One of those Airstreams, those silver things, they weigh about 10,000 pounds. If you have a full, fifth wheel, we're talking 16 to 20,000 pounds. So my 4,000 pound travel trailer doesn't really do well with wind. We have famously been stranded in Trinidad, Colorado for 12 hours waiting for the Raton Pass wind to die down. We have been stranded somewhere in Wyoming, I can't even tell you where because we didn't know where we were, on the side of the road because the wind was so bad. Wind is not our friend. So one night during the trip, we're sleeping 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. The windows are open, that beautiful Gulf breeze is blowing in, and it begins to rain. Now, there is nothing like rain on the top of a camper, just that pitter-patter. It's just so soothing. But then the rain picked up, and there was more rain. Then there was a little bit of wind that was blowing rain into the windows, so we closed the windows down. And then the thunder and the lightning came along, which brought with it 2 children into our bed with us. And then the wind started kind of moving our camper back and forth. And I thought, how much wind is this? And so I got my little app out. We were having 60-mile-an-hour gusts. That's 3/4 of a hurricane wind strength, okay? And I had 3 thoughts. My first thought was, I really hope we don't hit 80 miles an hour and start rolling down the beach. My second thought was, what sin did I commit that God is taking this storm out on me? And my third thought, where did that come from? Each of us has an embedded theology inside of us that jumps into our heads. Often we don't even consider, do I believe in that? It just is there. It's from our childhoods, our church experiences, our histories, and it impacts what we believe. And I would say you probably don't believe the same thing you did when you were a teenager or a young adult or a child, but all of those beliefs are still kind of inside, moving around you. It doesn't matter if you're an ex-evangelical or an ex-Catholic, an ex-Mormon, or you grew up a mainline grace-filled United Methodist. If you have a Christian history, you have something embedded in you that you bring into your current existence. And that theology we bring equates sin with punishment. And what we do is we tend to correlate, oh, I've done something wrong, or I'm having a challenge and a difficult time, and so this is because I made a mistake and I'm being punished for it. I sinned, and there's a storm on the beach randomly in Texas. Those 2 things equate together. And we don't stop to think, but wait a minute, that's not how I actually think God works. Is that the way the divine loves us in the world? Can we separate sin from punishment? Can we differentiate a difficult season we're experiencing from any sense of God's retribution? Will we be people of grace, or do we think punishment is a part of that journey? Do we believe Jesus' death on the cross erased the power of sin in our lives or not? One of the reasons I so enjoy Paul's letters is they show us his struggles of what it meant to be church. He's trying to figure what he believes out in real time. And so when you read the book of Galatians, you see the complexity of a church trying to figure out who it is when it's really diverse. Gentile and Jew, woman and man, free and slave, all trying to live together. When you read Corinthians, you see Paul saying to the people, this is how you're supposed to be as a community. This is how I want you to treat one another. And the book of Romans constantly has this idea of sin and falling short of the glory of God. Paul speaks about this, and I want to read to you some of his words from a little different translation, though. It's from the Message, which might not be something you're familiar with. It's modern language, but I love how it personalizes Paul's struggle. And I want to invite you to consider, how does this feel familiar to you? For I know the law, but still can't keep it. And if the power of sin within me keeps me sabotaging my best intentions, I obviously need help. I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do good. I decide not to do bad, but I do bad anyway. My decisions, such as they are, don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me and gets the better of me every time. This is how we talk about sin as church. This is how we have historically talked about sin. But I wonder if for too long the church has been focused on individual sins. If we get focused on rules and behaviors. Now, I want sin language to be powerful. I want it to call us to accountability, but it has to be rooted in what is the root of sin, the problem of sin, and not the rules we put in place to not have that problem. And this is where Paul is so helpful to us. Paul views sin as the distortion of our relationship with God. Paul isn't focused on the individual acts that led to that distortion. He's focused on there's something within us. So hear this language as he continues. Every good rule starts out as legitimate. It has a function in the wider world. For without clear guidelines of right and wrong, moral behavior would kind of be guesswork. The rules started out as an excellent piece of work, but the rules itself is not a replacement for God's good common sense and holy counsel. What Paul is saying, especially to the Jewish context, is this. You have 613 laws, and you can't follow them. And they aren't about sin. They become focused on following those 613 rules, and they've lost the original intent of those rules. And the original intent is, we have made an idol out of almost everything else. The original intent is your relationship with God. And what was God's first rule? The first rule God said, thou shalt not have no other idols before me. And what did the people do? Every other rule thereafter is about how we are replacing God with something else. It doesn't matter what it is. The rule exists because we can't follow the first rule, which is to not have any other gods before God. The challenge of our current context, though, is even a little more complicated because we have weaponized sin. We use it in the world today to bring shame. We've used it to try and control, and it causes harm. To the point that when people hear the word sin, they often recoil with a visceral bodily reaction. We have made sin a condition. And we've made sin conditional on doing certain things. And it plays out like this. If you follow all the rules in the Bible, then God will love you and you will be happy. If you lose 20 pounds, then you will be worthy of being loved. If you live a perfectly righteous ecological lifestyle, you will be worthy of taking up space in the planet. If you never have a racist, sexist, or homophobic thought, then you will be worthy of calling other people out on their racism and their sexism and their homophobia. Sin conditions your relationship with God and even the language of sin. Our use of sin has distorted this relationship. We have lost the conversation about grace. Theologian Karl Barth says this: we are forbidden to take sin more seriously than grace. Forbidden. I'm a sinner. You are a sinner. And because of grace, we are also saints of this faith. Now, it doesn't mean we get to use grace as an excuse for bad behavior. That's not okay. Enabling harm is still a sin. And using grace to defend or justify our actions cheapens that grace. The point of the crucifixion is that sin no longer has hold of you, because sin doesn't lead to death, because Jesus now controls death. Ronley Davis offers us a different framework for this that might be helpful in his book, In a Forgiving God in an Unforgiving World. He tells the story of this Filipino priest who went from parish to parish. And the priest carried with him this wound, this deep sin that he had committed. And no matter how many times he repented, no matter how many confessions he went to, he could not be free of that thought that God was punishing him for his sin. He came to a parish and found a religious woman who believed and knew the love of God, but she claimed that God came and talked with her face to face in her dreams. And the priest was initially, obviously, skeptical, so he decided to test her. He said, the next time you talk with God, I want you to ask him, what was the sin your priest committed while he was in seminary? The woman agreed. She was all in for it. A few days later, the priest meets her and he says, well, what did God tell you? Did he visit you in your dreams? And she said, yes, he did. And did you ask him what sin I committed in seminary? Yes, I did. And what did God say? God said, I don't remember. We have to decide if we are going to be people focused on sin and rules and behaviors, or if we will be people of grace, people of hope, people who recognize if God forgives, then God forgets. What people will we be?